You think you know everything, so you believe I can't speak for myself.
It's not about what I think I know. It's about what is true, and the truth speaks louder than words you try to hide.
The courtroom air was thick with anticipation. Every whisper bouncing off the high ceilings like a drumbeat counting down to a moment no one could predict. The girl sat rigid in her chair, fingers twisted nervously in her lap. Eyes darting toward the polished oak bench where Judge Caprio presided with unwavering calm. His gaze, steady and piercing, scanned the room, seeming to weigh every heartbeat, every falter, every secret that had brought them here. Murmurs rippled through the audience, a collective tension that felt almost tangible. Cameras focused, pens hovered over notepads, and yet no one dared interrupt the silent war brewing between truth and deception. The gavel rested like a silent sentinel, its presence a promise that justice would speak. Even if the world around it trembled, every subtle twitch of the girl betrayed her inner struggle. The flicker of guilt in her eyes, the slight hesitation in her voice. This wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning. And Judge Caprio, with the quiet authority of a man who had seen lies crumble countless times before, leaned forward, his expression calm but unyielding. The spectators felt it in their chests, a story about to explode, a truth about to surface, a moment they would recount for years. The room held its collective breath, the seconds stretching, taut and electric. Something monumental was about to unfold, something that would challenge not just the girl, but every expectation anyone had walked in with. But what happened when the truth finally emerged left everyone stunned. The courtroom was no ordinary room. It was a stage where reputations, futures, and the fragile threads of public trust hung in delicate balance. Every detail seemed charged with significance, the polished benches gleaming under the overhead lights, the muted murmur of spectators, the occasional shuffle of papers that punctuated the silence. This was not merely a legal proceeding, it was a crucible where character would be tested. And truths could not hide behind excuses. The girl's presence at the center of this storm carried weight far beyond her own fate. Family members watched from the gallery, their eyes a mixture of hope, fear, and disappointment. Years of guidance, of whispered warnings about integrity and consequence, culminated in this tense moment. Judge Caprio had already reminded her on multiple occasions that honesty was not optional in his courtroom, that the smallest misstep could ripple outward, affecting not only her life, but the faith of the public in the system itself. Outside the courtroom, whispers of the case had already begun to circulate. News outlets, social media feeds, and local communities buzzed with speculation. Everyone watching knew that this hearing would be remembered for years. Touchstone moment for accountability, honesty, and the principles that held society together. This was not just about a single lie. It was a test of moral courage, a public examination of whether fear or truth would guide her choices. The stakes were unmistakable. One misstatement, one hesitation, one faltering glance could tip the balance. It's not only determining personal consequences, but shaping public perception of justice itself. The courtroom seemed to shrink around her, as though the walls themselves pressed in, demanding clarity, demanding responsibility, demanding truth. Every spectator, every silent witness, felt the weight of the moment pressing down like a tangible force. In that heavy, suffocating quiet, the tension became almost unbearable. Yet behind the girl's trembling facade was a story no one expected. The girl had never imagined herself here, under the relentless gaze of a courtroom that demanded truth. Growing up, she had learned to navigate pressures with small, carefully calculated missteps, little lies that felt harmless at the time. At home, there were whispered expectations, subtle pushes from parents to get ahead no matter the cost, coupled with their own anxieties about reputation and success. Friends, too, had been complicit in these minor deceptions, praising clever evasions, framing dishonesty as a skill rather than a flaw. It was a pattern that had grown quietly, almost imperceptibly. Until now, it threatened to define the very moment that would be remembered by everyone watching. Even in school, she had skirted the truth with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Excuses were polished, narratives rehearsed. Each small misstep became a lesson in performance. Learn how to justify, how to convince, how to keep the cracks hidden. In the courtroom, that same performance now flickered under the intense scrutiny of Judge Caprio, a man whose reputation for fairness was matched only by his ability to see through artifice. She felt it in her chest, a mix of fear, defiance, and the faint trace of entitlement that had never been tested. Against such unwavering authority, her parents shifted uncomfortably in the gallery. Exchanging quiet whispers that barely rose above the hum of the room, a friend's eyes flicked toward her, then away, betraying concern and an unspoken judgment. Outside, social media was already stirring with speculation, commentators dissecting prior behavior, clips of earlier hearings trending, pundits framing the case as a test of moral integrity in the age of accountability. The girl's history of small lies, once brushed off as harmless, now seemed to loom like a shadow over every statement she made, every nervous glance she cast. Despite the tension, she tried to maintain composure, repeating rehearsed lines in her head, recalling every prior warning, every subtle guidance meant to steer her toward honesty. But the very pattern that had once protected her, the lies layered carefully over time, now created a fragile house of cards. Each word she spoke, each hesitation, carried the potential to unravel not just her testimony, but the entire narrative she had built around herself. The courtroom seemed to pulse with expectation. Everyone felt it. The anticipation, the unspoken warning that truth and integrity could no longer be evaded. And in that charged atmosphere, it became clear that the girl's facade was brittle, poised on the edge of collapse, vulnerable to the scrutiny of a judge who had made it his life's work to separate honesty from deception. Meanwhile, Judge Caprio's calm wisdom had prepared him for a moment like this. Judge Caprio had not arrived at the bench by chance. His journey was one forged in patience, experience, and an unshakable belief in the principle that justice must be tempered with compassion. From his earliest days in law school, he had distinguished himself, not through showmanship, but through meticulous preparation and an uncanny ability to read both the letter and the spirit of the law. Every case he presided over, every sentence he delivered, reflected a career devoted to fairness and the measured application of authority. In the courtroom, his presence was immediately commanding, yet never overbearing. Each ritual, the quiet adjustment of his robe, the deliberate placement of the gavel, the steady gaze cast across the room conveyed calm control. When he spoke, the words were deliberate, precise, and imbued with clarity. There was a rhythm to his questioning, a cadence that allowed both parties to speak while simultaneously revealing the truth. Every pause, every subtle tilt of the head, carried meaning, signaling attentiveness without judgment. A silent insistence that honesty mattered above all else. Caprio's career was marked not only by the high-profile cases that drew public attention, but by countless moments where his guidance had quietly shaped lives. He had tutored young attorneys, encouraged witnesses to speak with courage, and gently steered those who faltered under pressure toward accountability. In every decision, he sought balance, upholding the law while preserving dignity, ensuring consequences without crushing humanity. Those who had crossed his bench before spoke of a man who could see deception from a mile away, yet never relished exposing it. His aim was always instruction and moral clarity, not humiliation. Colleagues and observers alike recognized a pattern in his approach, while others might have rushed to judgment. Caprio waited, watched, and allowed the natural unfolding of truth to illuminate the path forward. It was this patience, combined with an unwavering commitment to ethical standards, that had earned him respect far beyond the courtroom walls. People trusted him not because he intimidated, but because he inspired. Even those facing difficult truths often emerged understanding the importance of honesty and accountability, lessons they carried long after leaving the chambers. On this particular day, every detail of the courtroom seemed calibrated to reveal the layers beneath the girl's trembling demeanor. Caprio's eyes swept across the room with quiet authority, noting the tension in the spectators, the subtle hesitation in the girl's posture, the anticipatory murmurs of her parents. His mind had cataloged every prior interaction, every warning he had issued, every nuance that might signal deceit. Beneath the calm exterior, he was prepared for the moral challenge ahead, ready to guide both witness and audience toward a moment of clarity. In his measured way, Caprio embodied the very ideals that the courtroom and society itself relied upon: fairness, integrity, patience, and the courage to confront falsehood without losing compassion. The audience, both in the room and beyond, could feel the weight of his presence. It was a promise that deception would not prevail, and that truth, no matter how difficult, would always have its day. The stage was set. What happened next would leave the entire courtroom and the nation speechless. The room seemed to shrink as Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his hands resting calmly on the bench. Every eye in the courtroom was drawn to him, and every ear attuned to his voice, steady yet deliberate. He began his questioning with measured precision, each inquiry crafted not just to gather facts, but to reveal the layers beneath the girl's carefully constructed story. At first she answered in rehearsed sentences, her tone controlled, her posture rigid. But beneath the surface, tension radiated from every gesture, the slight quiver in her hands. The way her eyes flicked to her parents, the way her lips pressed tightly together before forming a response. Small contradictions began to surface, a timeline that didn't align, a detail that seemed rehearsed rather than remembered. Every pause, every stammer, was magnified in the silence that had fallen across the courtroom. The spectators leaned forward instinctively. Murmurs rippled softly through the gallery, a collective intake of breath that punctuated the weight of the moment. Cameras panned slowly, capturing the flicker of uncertainty on the girl's face. The calm authority etched into Judge Caprio's expression. Each gavel tap, subtle yet deliberate, punctuated the unfolding drama like the heartbeat of the room itself. The tension was cinematic, almost unbearable, a slow-burning fuse that threatened to explode at any moment. Despite the mounting pressure, Judge Caprio remained unflappable. His composure contrasted sharply with the girl's unraveling, highlighting the disparity between moral steadiness and fragile deception. Every question he asked seemed to peel back a layer, revealing both her fear and the cracks in her story. The courtroom felt suspended in time. Every word weighed heavily, every glance amplified. No one dared look away. Every spectator, whether in the room or watching clips later online, felt the suspense in their bones. The anticipation was electric, the unspoken knowledge that something monumental was about to happen. That one misstep could shatter not only the girl's narrative, but the fragile balance of dignity and accountability in the room. Then, Judge Caprio asked a single question that changed everything. Judge Caprio's gaze never wavered as he leaned forward, his voice calm but precise, carrying across the hushed courtroom. "Let's revisit the statements you made earlier," began, his words deliberate, each one measured to draw out the truth without a hint of malice. The girl swallowed hard, her eyes wide, fingers tightening around the edge of her chair. She had rehearsed responses, lines meant to deflect, to protect herself, yet here, under the quiet authority of the judge, each carefully constructed excuse began to falter. He recited her prior testimony, pausing after each statement. "You said you were home at 6 o'clock, yet your phone records indicate you were elsewhere. You mentioned a conversation with your teacher that never occurred. And your friend, who you claimed was with you, testified differently. Can you explain these contradictions?" His tone was even almost gentle, but the weight of undeniable evidence pressed upon her like a physical force. A tremor ran through the girl as her rehearsed composure cracked. She opened her mouth, hesitated, and then closed it again. Her eyes darted to her parents, who were frozen in anxious disbelief. Even friends in the gallery could not hide the flicker of concern that crossed their faces. The camera pans caught every subtle reaction, the slight quiver of a lip, the shallow intake of breath, the way her hands clenched and unclenched as though seeking anchor in thin air. The courtroom's collective pulse seemed to synchronize with hers, tension thick enough to taste. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, letting silence stretch, a pause long enough to amplify the gravity of her unraveling. "You see," he continued, "the truth has a way of revealing itself no matter how carefully it is hidden. Accountability is not optional. Integrity is not negotiable." Each word landed with precision, an unspoken weight that caused even the most inattentive spectators to sit straighter. Eyes fixed on the exchange, and then it happened. The girl's defenses crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks as sobs broke through the fragile barrier of her earlier composure. She could not form words, could not justify, could not reclaim control. Her shame was palpable, a living force filling every corner of the courtroom. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, soft, sympathetic, astonished, while cameras lingered, capturing the raw human truth unfolding in real time. Every close-up magnified the emotional resonance, every pause emphasizing the finality of the confrontation. Outside the courtroom, social media erupted. Clips of the hearing flooded feeds with the hashtag Truth Prevails trending within minutes. Commentators dissected every moment. The calm authority of Judge Caprio, the girl's faltering testimony, the moral clarity that had emerged so undeniably. "This will go viral," one whispered in a newsroom. "Everyone needs to see how integrity wins," said another, as tweets and stories multiplied like wildfire. The courtroom had become a stage, and the lesson in yielding honesty was now a viral sensation. Inside, the girl's collapse was total. She sank into her seat, unable to defend herself against the irrefutable logic that had been laid bare. Judge Caprio remained composed, the embodiment of steady moral authority, unaffected by the drama swirling around him. His dignity radiated quietly, a stark contrast to the chaos of the moment, highlighting the triumph of steadfastness over deception, calm over panic, principle over performance. Even as the courtroom absorbed the magnitude of what had occurred, a subtle, almost imperceptible energy shifted. Spectators felt it. The moral victory had been won before the gavel fell. It was not punishment that defined this moment. It was clarity, accountability, and the irrefutable power of truth. The lesson resonated not just with the girl, but with everyone who witnessed it, whether in the gallery or through the screens capturing every angle of the unfolding drama. By the time the girl's sobs began to quiet, the courtroom had transformed. Shock had given way to reflection, tension to understanding, embarrassment to the undeniable presence of moral consequence. The murmurs were no longer whispers of disbelief. They were acknowledgments of a lesson learned in real time, a demonstration that integrity could not be feigned, that honesty was both shield and compass. Judge Caprio's calm eyes swept across the room one last time, and in that gaze, there was neither triumph nor cruelty, only the quiet, unwavering authority of a man who had guided others to truth for decades. The contrast could not have been clearer. The girl's unraveling exposed vulnerability and guilt, while the judge's composure illustrated experience, patience, and the weight of ethical certainty. Every viewer, whether present or watching later, understood the story's moral. Deception is fleeting, integrity endures. The courtroom eruption was only the beginning. The story rippled far beyond these walls. The moment the courtroom emptied, the story did not fade, it ignited. Within minutes, clips of the hearing flooded social media feeds. Hashtags like hashtag Truth Prevails, hashtag Judge Caprio, and hashtag Courtroom Lesson trended nationwide. Shared across platforms, retweeted, reposted, and dissected in endless commentary. People paused, replayed, and debated each word, each pause, each subtle gesture. The girl's faltering testimony became a cautionary tale, while Judge Caprio's calm authority was praised endlessly. "This is how justice should be delivered," one post read. "A reminder that integrity always matters," another echoed. Every share carried a ripple of collective validation, reinforcing the drama that had unfolded in the courtroom. Family and friends of the girl remained stunned, caught between empathy and frustration. Her parents, once anxious and conflicted, now wrestled with the reality of accountability in a very public way. Friends whispered among themselves, analyzing the moment with equal parts concern and awe. Conversations spilled over into living rooms and classrooms, into offices and cafes, as people discussed how truth, no matter how uncomfortable, demanded attention and respect. The girl herself, in the days following, reflected publicly on her actions, acknowledging the consequences of her choices and the lessons learned under the steady hand of a judge who valued honesty above all. Her statements, tinged with humility and regret, were met with a mixture of sympathy and admiration for her courage to face accountability. Legal commentators, both in media and online forums, dissected every angle of the hearing. Analysts praised Judge Caprio's methodical approach, his ability to reveal inconsistencies without aggression, and the way he balanced fairness with moral clarity. National outlets ran segments highlighting the case as a model for courtroom civics, emphasizing the power of patience, observation, and the ethical weight that defines true leadership. Even minor subplots emerged. Discussions about the responsibility of witnesses, the role of social pressure, and how community values intersect with the justice system. Each ripple reinforced the larger narrative. This was more than a single courtroom exchange. It was a societal lesson amplified through technology, culture, and civic awareness. Community forums and school discussions seized on the story, framing it as an example for young people navigating honesty, pressure, and personal integrity. Educators, mentors, and civic leaders referenced the case, sharing clips and narratives to illustrate the consequences of deceit and the value of truth. Neighborhood gatherings, social media groups, and even local town halls debated the ethical dimensions of her choices, often highlighting Judge Caprio's composure as a model of calm authority and moral leadership. Every conversation, every comment, every share contributed to a broader social validation. This was not just a legal lesson. It was a moral event, with lessons for all who witnessed it. The story's impact extended far beyond the courtroom walls. The girl's moment of vulnerability sparked reflection, while Judge Caprio's example inspired admiration nationwide. The convergence of social media amplification, public discussion, and ethical reflection turned a single courtroom confrontation into a cultural touchstone. Civic lessons spread organically, the importance of honesty, the accountability of actions, and the enduring power of moral courage became topics of conversation far beyond the legal sphere. The emotional resonance of the event, amplified through every retweet, post, and commentary, created a shared understanding. Integrity was not abstract. It was lived, witnessed, and validated in real time. Yet the lesson of this courtroom went far beyond one girl's mistake. Judge Caprio's voice, calm and deliberate, filled the courtroom once more, carrying a clarity that resonated far beyond the immediate drama. What we witnessed here today, he began, is not simply the unraveling of one story, but a reminder of a truth that applies to all of us. Honesty is never optional, and integrity is the foundation on which we build trust, not just with others, but with ourselves. His gaze swept across the room, connecting with each person in the gallery, each member of the audience, each observer who would see this moment unfold through screens and retellings. He framed the girl's experience, not as shame alone, but as a lesson in responsibility and dignity. Accountability, he continued, is not a punishment, but a courage we must summon to face our choices openly. We all stumble, we all make mistakes, but how we respond defines our character. Choosing truth, even when it is uncomfortable, elevates us. It aligns our actions with the principles we claim to uphold. The weight of his words lingered, carrying a quiet power that rippled through the room, touching hearts, prompting reflection, and igniting a desire to act with greater integrity. The girl, still trembling, absorbed the lesson with a mix of humility and recognition. Her earlier panic and fear transformed into a moment of awakening, a realization that transparency and honesty, though difficult, were always the pathway to trust and self-respect. Around her, the audience nodded, some quietly reflecting on their own choices, others exchanging glances that acknowledged the universal relevance of the lesson. It was not just a personal reckoning, it was a mirror for everyone present. Judge Caprio concluded with a note that transcended the courtroom. Let this moment remind us that truth has a way of prevailing, that courage is found in accountability, and that dignity is preserved when we act with integrity. These are the principles that strengthen our communities, our institutions, and ourselves. Remember them, practice them, and carry them forward in your own lives. In that instant, the tension and drama of the day resolved into clarity and purpose. The audience left uplifted, inspired, and motivated, not merely by the spectacle of a courtroom confrontation, but by the universal lesson embedded within it. Each person carried a spark of reflection, an emotional resonance that would influence how they approached honesty, responsibility, and moral courage in their own lives. Now, it's up to each of us to carry this lesson forward. Girl breaks down after lying to Judge Caprio. Unexpected twist. Those words don't capture just a single courtroom moment. They reflect a universal story about honesty, accountability, the courage it takes to face the consequences of our choices. What unfolded in that courtroom was more than drama. It was a lesson in integrity, a reminder that truth has a way of surfacing. No matter how carefully we try to hide from it, Judge Caprio's calm authority and unwavering fairness stood in stark contrast to the girl's unraveling, creating a moment that will be remembered for its emotional clarity and moral resonance. It's a story that leaves us reflecting on our own actions, the way we navigate difficult truths, and the principles we choose to live by. Watching her confrontation and eventual reckoning, we are reminded that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act rightly despite it. If this story moved you, if it sparked reflection or stirred a sense of responsibility, then be part of carrying the lesson forward. Subscribe to this channel to follow more stories where integrity faces challenge, where moral courage triumphs in unexpected ways. Share this video with friends, family, or anyone who could use a reminder that honesty matters. Comment below with your thoughts. How would you face a moment like this? And what lessons do you take from it? Your reflections help turn a single courtroom story to a broader conversation about values and accountability. And for those eager for more, the next video dives into another courtroom confrontation with a twist that challenges assumptions and tests principles in ways that are both surprising and inspiring. Stay tuned. Stay engaged, and remember, integrity, courage, and honesty are not just words, they are actions that shape lives, communities, and the world we live in.